So you found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dapper Reacts number whatever, 63. Yep, it's 63. I know what I'm doing. I am here, obviously, with Dr. Kip Davis and Vishanti. Almost said Dr. Vishanti and Kip Davis. I was like, wait a minute, hold on. That's not right.
I don't have a problem with that.
Well, I mean,
Suddenly.
I only have a problem in that I already talk about people who like have fake degrees and really like to be called doctor, and it's like no. Like
Yeah.
the most obvious one is Kent Hovind, but every once in a while James White pops up and it's like, dude, you don't. I've heard rumors that maybe he's working on a real degree, but like till that happens and I'm aware of it, no, you're not a doctor. Not how that works. So.
Yeah.
But hey, we are here to continue on with our discussion based on a CMI video about whether or not the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, were written by Moses, or whether there was a series of documents that were compiled by some later redactor or editor. And, I mean, basically the entirety of scholarship is on the side of some version of the multiple documents put together by an editor. Exact number of documents involved. Sometimes some people will say, more like 3 or 4, or maybe we're not sure exactly how many, but it's at least 3 or at least 4 or something. Fade DeGray says, Dapper Dinosaur is my favorite linguist and Bible scholar, despite the fact that I am neither.
Oh, hey, I should mention that just 10 minutes before the stream, my son told me that I should not listen to a dinosaur. And I said, what if he's a dapper dinosaur? And he said, that's even worse.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, you heard it here, guys. This is our last time with Kip. After this, no more Kip Davis on the channel.
Can I draw attention to my my Batcat t-shirt? Not Catman, as people are very fond of.
It's not a man. It's a cat.
It's not a man. He's a cat.
There's no man anything there.
No, there's not. I'm wearing this today intentionally because this last week, Paulogia told me that I have the detective skills of Batman and J. Warner Wallace.
Okay. Nice.
I take that as high praise.
Agreed.
Okay.
All right, so guys, we are activating the drinking rules for today. My coffee has a little bit of something extra in it. I think Kip's might as well. I don't know about Vishanti.
No, I don't typically drink on these streams.
Well, I mean, it's not like I've poured an entire bottle of liquor in here. There's a splash of something extra at the bottom of this coffee cup. Dr. Dino, for $5, says, Aloha, wanted to say thank you for last night. Dapper raised over $100 last night, and I really appreciate you shouting it out. Field work, go brrr. So yeah, Dr. Dino was working on getting some funding together for a paleontology expedition. Go out do some paleontology field work. And yeah, there was a fundraiser stream last night. I wasn't able to make it to the stream, but I did put up a community post. So that is what that is in reference to. So I'm glad that it worked out well, Dr. Dino. I hope that your expedition is less of a financial burden than it otherwise would have been, which sounds like it was. So, guys, we're not going to go over all the drinking rules. We go over them every Tuesday. If you don't know them because you're new here, you'll catch up. And if you really, really, really feel like you need to know them, just go watch the opening bit of any Tuesday stream because we go over them pretty much every time. With that being said, though, I think before we actually get into the video, Kip, do you want to show your video that you have prepared that is on this exact topic? Like, when do you want to put that in there?
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with that.
Should we maybe just start with that? So, like, I have put together on my channel like an entire fairly extensive presentation of the evidence for the documentary hypothesis and why scholars find it convincing. Hold on a sec. I got to get this this back to the beginning here. So there are now they're not the most intuitively. And now my computer
you're back.
Froze up. No. Oh, there we go. It just, remember, it takes time because my computer's old and slow. Okay. So, yeah. All right. I think I'm ready for that. So it's not the most intuitively available because it's within a series of streams that I did about inspiring philosophy. Mm-hmm. But there are I made 3 videos. The first was an introduction to the documentary hypothesis. The second was the evidence for the documentary hypothesis. And the third one was responses and counter responses to the documentary hypothesis. And all told, it's almost 3 hours of material. And because I use super cool music in it, it's all been demonetized. So this is a public service, guys. But anyways, I thought in preparation for today, I would pull just a couple of elements from the evidence video, which itself is almost an hour long. And just because I get the strong sense very often when we broach this topic that people just simply do not understand why scholars have adopted this theory or source theories in general for reading the Pentateuch. So if we could just maybe take like 10 minutes to go through some of this stuff, we can share my screen now.
All right. While you're getting that set up, I just want to say Nathaniel Nucleotides Are Genes Great for $2 says, or Dr. Baugh. Yep, Carl Baugh is another one with the not a real PhD. And then DM and his deplorable ilk wing for $2 says, Dr. Dapper Dinosaur, PhD linguist with a Godzilla, so we'll take a drink for that Godzilla. And then a bunch of turtles, of course. I just want to point out, I am not a PhD in anything, including linguistics. This is not a thing.
Also, yes, Hag Sameach Pasach to April Van Bryn and some awe and Triceratops and any other tribe or well-wishers in the chat. I'm very proud of myself. Yesterday, I grilled hamburgers that I had marinated in a sauce or a marinade that's only sold in the Deep South, and I had my mom mail me bottles of because they don't sell it out here. Wow. So yeah, I grilled burgers and I put them on home-baked matzah buns. Nice. I was so freaking proud of myself. Also, it was delicious. Wow. I had it with crinkle cut fries.
Rana K has been a member for 2 months, is at the Tetrapod level, and says, is Kip's computer so old it runs on pre-Yiddish? I still can't believe Raw Matt said the words pre-Yiddish in a discussion about languages of the Bible. This is so many layers of dumb.
I'm so confused.
I mean, they all are, aren't they?
No, most of them aren't that dumb.
Well, no, they're all pre-Yiddish, though.
He's the ordained Essene, right?
Yes.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. All right, so, okay, what do you got for us in your slideshow here?
Are we ready to go? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, here, and this is now, importantly, I think I mentioned last time there are problems with the 4-source model, but it's relatively easy to illustrate for convenience. On this first slide, this is just one of the ways in which scholars started to think that maybe there was something strange going on with the Pentateuchal narrative that indicates that there were multiple sources involved, is that there seem to be doublets or repetitions of numerous stories throughout the Pentateuch. So I just have a listing of a few of them. There are 2 creation stories in the Pentateuch. There are 2 versions of the flood in the Pentateuch. There are multiple doublets of stories about Abraham, from the banishment of Hagar to the naming of Beersheba to the covenant with God or with Yahweh. There are actually 3 versions of the Exodus story in the Pentateuch. There are actually 3 versions of the 10 words or the 10 commandments in the Pentateuch. there are multiple versions of rules for foreign animals, as well as many others, such as for slavery and usury. Like source criticism in the legal material is like a whole thing all unto itself. Now, in the video, I go into some depth to illustrate how this works in one story featuring Abraham and the banishment, basically, of Hagar. This is the story where Abraham has been given the slave of Sarah in order to propagate his own seed, and Ishmael is born. And there's two stories about how Sarah and Ishmael end up leaving the family and the protection of Abraham. One appears in Genesis 16, the other one appears in Genesis 21. And scholars have by and large agreed that these are two versions of the same stories. I go into some depth about this in my video, but just some of the highlights. We see that in both stories, Hagar makes Sarah jealous. Hagar is driven out into the wilderness. Hagar encounters God. Importantly, in the J version, in Genesis 16, he's consistently identified as Yahweh. In the E version, or the probably the P version, according to some, he's identified exclusively as Elohim. And then God promises that Ishmael will found a nation. This has convinced scholars that these are probably two versions of the same story. Now, there's some really important key differences between the stories. In the J version, Hagar is pregnant, but then in the E version, she has already had a son. This is often missed by a lot of people. In the J version, Sarai, not Sarah, is upset by Hagar's behavior. This is what prompts the conflict. But in the E version, she's upset by the thought of Ishmael inheriting. Then in the J version, Abram, not Abraham, has contempt for the pregnant Hagar. Whereas in the E version, he actually has affection, not for Hagar. He doesn't really care. But he has affection for Ishmael. He doesn't want anything bad to happen to Ishmael, right? And importantly, you'll notice again, there's a name difference there too, right? So in the J version, Hagar actually escapes abuse. She runs away. But in the E version, she's banished. She's sent away. And I'm pretty sure I misspelled banished there, didn't I? God, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that means the doppelganger hypothesis has been disproved if I know anything based on Twitter discourse.
Probably.
You make one spelling mistake, everything you said is now invalid.
I am a terrible speller. It's
Look,
really
English and spelling
really
is complete nonsense. Admission. So like,
yeah, English and spelling. It just decided. I don't feel like it.
English has needed a spelling reform for like 1,000 years, and it just has never bothered.
Probably, yeah.
And also, English has way too many frickin' vowels.
Yeah, it does.
So many, right? Yeah.
Like, hey, how would you like 16 or something vowels? Like, no. Like 5, maybe? Can we do 5?
Yeah, we can live with that many, right? Now, in the story, in the J version of the story, remember, she runs away, Hagar runs away, and she arrives. She ends up at a well. In the E story, she ends up in the wilderness. She ends up, her son Ishmael is on the brink of death, and she's in dire straits, and the well is miraculously revealed to her. And then she has an encounter with God, and in the first story, she's actually instructed to return to Abraham, but in the second story, her life and the life of Ishmael is saved, and it just says that he grows and he settles in this place called Paran. Now, some of the key important differences here between the stories, and also some of the differences in the depiction of God between the two stories are really important. In the first one, as I mentioned, he's consistently called Yahweh. In the second version, he's consistently called Elohim. You'll notice
Hey,
also
Dr.
these
Kip,
differences.
Real quick.
Yep.
I just want to say thank you to Christopher Sanford for gifting 10 memberships. They went to Deboop himself, Ernex, Andrew Muliar, JMCA Does Lifts, Vadim Slomovsky-Radchenko, Tilting Windmill, Prospera Ad Astra, and Dr. Joel Duff. Thank you very much. So while Kip is continuing on, I will take my 10 drinks.
All right. We have these name differences. Now, this is a real key one. And one of the ways in which scholars also identify the differences between certainly the P material and the non-P material, which includes J. God, it literally says in the J account that the messenger of Yahweh just shows up to Hagar and just speaks to her face to face, just like an ordinary man. Whereas in the E version, the angel of Elohim speaks out of the sky, like a disembodied voice, and that's pretty consistent throughout the P material and the non-P material. And then whoever stitched these stories together very cleverly added this linking hinge here as a way to divide the material where the names are different. He added this story about the change of Abram's name to Abraham, which I think was done just exclusively to provide some further conflation of the material from different sources. So,
do you think the later renaming of Jacob parallels this?
Yeah, it does.
Together narratives from different sources.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's what's at work too. And if you want to see another one of these, we can just jump right into a story about Jacob, where in one of the most famous examples, one of the most prevalent examples of the existence of sources is in the story of Joseph's enslavement in Egypt, which appears in Genesis chapter 37. And here what I've done is, and I'm not going to read the whole things. I'm just going to kind of go through some of the high points here. What I've done here is I've divided that story as it appears in Genesis 37 into its individual sources. Importantly, in doing so, I have not provided any alteration to the text at all. I've just split it up based on where I think the sources go. And you end up with two pretty different stories, but with some similarities. The first story I've called Joseph the Dreamer, and it starts off by introducing Joseph, and it says that he was a bit of a brat, and he brought a bad report of his brothers to his father, which makes them angry at him. And then it tells us that he had dreams in which he had these visions of aggrandizement over the rest of his family, which further made them very upset at him. At the end of this account, in verse 11, it says that his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now, significantly in this story, Jacob is always identified by that name, Jacob. So it continues. And the brothers say, here comes this dreamer. Now, let's kill him. Throw him into one of these pits, and we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and then we'll see what has become of his dreams. So that's the first story. I'm going to pause there and then introduce the second story, which I've titled Joseph and the Colorful Garment. So Joseph is the son of Israel. And Israel loves Joseph more than any of his children, and he made for him this very colorful, expensive garment that made his brothers jealous. So his brothers went out to pasture his father's flock way out near Shechem, and Israel's concerned, so he sends Joseph to go look up, check up on them, and so he goes. He can't find them, and they eventually say, and he's told they're actually pasturing near Dothan, so you need to go there. And so he goes and finds his brothers at Dothan, but they see him at a distance, and before he comes near, they decide to kill him. Let's continue with the Joseph the Dreamer story. So They've decided they're going to kill him. They sit down to eat, and they see a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead on their way down to Egypt. So Judah proposes to his brothers that instead of killing him, let's just sell him to the Ishmaelites. And so that's what they do. They sell him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And the Ishmaelites take Joseph to Egypt. And Jacob is upset when he finds out. He tears his garments. He puts sackcloth on his loins. And he mourns for his son because he thinks he's dead. And that's basically the end of this part of the story. So in the other story, we actually find that Reuben is the one who wants to intervene. So he rescues Joseph out of the hands of his brothers and says, let's not kill him, shed no blood, let's throw him into this pit here in the wilderness and not lay a hand on him. And then, so they took his robe off and they threw him into this empty pit, and it says there was no water in it. But then some Midianite traders came by and they found Joseph in this pit and they took him out of the pit. Reuben goes back to the pit and sees that he's not there, and he's upset. He's like, the boy is gone. Where can we turn? So they devise this story where they take the robe, this coat that he's been given, they kill a goat, they cover it in blood, and they bring it back to their father and say that we think Joseph was killed by a wild animal. And his father is very upset at this, and he mourns. Meanwhile, the Midianites have sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. These are two different stories. You guys could see that, right?
It's a good thing that they hadn't invented forensic science yet, because otherwise that whole goat ruse wouldn't have worked.
I probably wouldn't have, right? But
Never
here's what happens. Here is what the editor of this story has very cleverly attempted to do. This is how it appears in Genesis 37. You can see he's tried to dovetail all these individual bits of the two stories to create one story. But there are some parts of it that just do not work. This in the story of the dreamer, you'll notice that Judah is the one who assuages guilt in verses 25 to 27. What profit is it that we kill our brothers and conceal his blood? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. In the E story, it's Reuben who saves Joseph, right? And this actually appears before. Reuben delivers them out of his hands and throws them into the pit. But then we've got this problem of the Ishmaelites and the Midianites. So what ends up happening is you've got Midianite traders passing by. They take Joseph out of the pit and they sell him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And then it says they took Joseph to Egypt. But then at the end of the story, you have the Midianites who sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar. So what you end up here with is him being sold to the Ishmaelites, who then right away sold to the Midianites, who then right away sell him to the Ishmaelites, but then somehow the Midianites end up selling him in Egypt.
See, the Midianites...
Maybe Joseph was more trouble than he was worth, and the Ishmaelites were like, nah, we want to refund.
You take him! No, you take him! You take him!
The Midianites were like, fine, we'll dump him off in Egypt.
The inconsistencies between these stories give apologists absolute fits when it comes to attempting to reconcile what happens.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious. It's endlessly hilarious, the ways in which they attempt to compensate for these obvious, nonsensical differences if you're dealing with a single story.
That's like one of those things that's changed my perspective in terms of textual interpretation is I don't look at the Bible as one single narrative where it's like everything has to agree with everything else. I look at it as an anthology of like folklore and poetry and mytho-history that make up like the cultural story of my people. It's not a history book. It contains some history in it. It's not a theological how-to, even though there's instructions related to like ritual practice and stuff, but it's an anthology. It's like, I don't know, maybe, yeah, I mean, I don't even want to try to make an analogy because everything I try to compare it to is going to come up short. Because if I compare it to like the Twilight Zone, you'll just be like, oh yeah, but Rod Serling was the single mind behind it, so that's not a good.
It's like
analogy.
That's what I call scripture, 800 BC edition.
Right.
I mean, you could say it's something like the VHS films, where it's all individual stories told by different writers and directors, but it's all connected by like a sort of overarching narrative. There's frame story, I guess.
There's some
but even then, that's not really great. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's an anthology, and that's why I'm like, this is clever. I like the way that they stitch these together. You have to like
No, and it is really, I keep saying this too, it's brilliant, right? Like, the editor of the Pentateuch was a genius. Unquestionably, just in the ways in which the clever, creative ways, and it wasn't always just consistently one way. There were multiple strategies he employed to pull these individual traditions together. It's brilliant, but imperfect. And I don't think he was. I don't think he was that he was necessarily going for just total harmony, right? Now, I've taken a lot of time with this. I've got one more. I'll leave it up to you. Do you guys want to see that one? Yeah, it's
that for me was the strongest one.
Yeah,
it's
for
the
real.
genealogy.
Like, this one is not bad, but Toledo is like.
If you feel like it's going to take too long, you can always just give it a quick run over instead of a full in depth. But I think it's good to see it visually.
Okay, and it's one of my favorite ones too. That this is one that again, as far as I'm aware, I'm like the only person who's actually peeled these things apart in a visual way to show exactly what's going on. Now, this is all Hebrew, guys, and don't worry about it if you can't read it, because I've color coded everything to show exactly what's going on. The genealogy in which is commonly called the Table of Nations, which appears in Genesis 10, is actually comprised of the cobbling together of genealogies from two separate sources into one. And we can see exactly how this works, because the author of the P genealogy, one of the consistent features of his literary style is this strong tendency towards organization and formulas. Makes a lot of it really easy to read just through the excessive repetition of the ways in which he writes.
Line?
Sure.
Eile Toledot b'nei Noach, Shem, Ham, V'Yafet. Oh God, these are tiny.
Sorry.
V'yavaldu lahem banim echad hamavul.
Very good.
Hamabul. Sorry, I missed the Dagesh there.
You get a translator, or do you want me to?
Oh, and these are the generations of the sons of Noah: Shem, Ham, and Japheth, or Japheth. Let's see. I don't know the root verb of that, but that's to them.
Yalad.
The Yalad. Okay.
Yeah. And it's passive.
So that was born to them.
Yeah.
The Hamabul.
Hamabul is the flood.
Ahad. Yeah, so after the flood. Born to them.
Yeah, so these are the sons who were born to them after the flood. Very good. So, and I'm color coding some of the stuff, like there's a pattern in terms of the language that's used by this particular author. I've got some scripture references down there for you.
It's
so
really hard to read.
He follows.
It's that tiny.
Sorry, it's so small.
I blame the master for making such tiny little marks.
Yes. So, the P author follows this strict formula where he just says the sons of Yaphet are as follows. and the son. So he's got the sons of Japheth are Gomer, Magog, Medai, Yavin, Tuval, Meshach, and Tiras. And then the sons of Gomer are Ashkenaz, Rifat, and Togarma, and so on. Right, that's how it goes, and then he's got this concluding comment. So from these, they spread out to the coasts of the nations in their lands, every man according to his tongue, according to their clans in their nations. All right. Now he continues again. The sons of Ham, Cush, Mitzrayim or Egypt, Put, Canaan, sons of Cush, etc., etc. It's very well organized. Now, we have a break here where the editor now introduces material from a separate genealogy by a separate author. And we recognize this because he's shifted the way in which he tells this story. Instead of just listing the sons, he now says Cush Yalad, or gave birth to Nimrod, and he was the first of the great men on the land.
It's Nimrod.
So, real quick, I want to say thank you to Ben Pluto Thick Tunicate for gifting 5 memberships. I went to Star Hunter, Captain Butt, John Suffill, Sophie Fishbach, and David Berry. So thank you very much. I will take my 5 drinks while Kip continues.
Excellent. So here we've got the introduction of this new verb. Some parenthetical information about the person, and you can see this repeated in the next several verses. You've got the verb again. Yalad, Mitzrayim gave birth to the Ludim and the Anamim. So, but there's something else that's really important here that just does not translate into English, and that is the introduction of the definite. The indirect object marker. Sorry, the direct object marker et, which is not translatable, and it's a stylistic choice that the P author chose not to employ, but the E author clearly did.
Every single time it could possibly be there.
Yes, the other thing he did was, instead of listing the individual descendants as people, as sons, he's listed them as people groups, as nations. Mm-hmm. So he's got, the Ludim, the Anamim, the Lachemim, and on and on and on. And it continues like this, right? We've got, what do we have here? Okay, we've got this formula again that I attribute to the P author. These were the sons of Ham in their clans according to their tongues in the nations of in their lands in their nations. And then you've got more E stuff here with the verb yalad. Then you've got another mix. You've got some more benays. You've got some more yalads. So he's kind of switching back and forth here, right? He's taking bits and pieces from each genealogy and trying to cobble together a whole. Here is another parenthetical comment about Peleg. And then you've got more usage of yalad, more appearances of the definite article. You've got him mixing again. These are the sons of Yoktan.
So, Lunar Regolith Phantasmal Terrain says, not translatable, excuses, try harder. Look, Lunar Regolith Phantasmal Terrain...
Translate harder.
If you would like a version of the Bible, before or after every single name here, it says, in parentheses or something, which is the direct object of the verb begat. I mean, you can make that translation. Yeah. I don't want to read that translation because technically...
It's not translatable, skill issue.
Yeah, technically you could use that as a translation, right? You'd be like, that's how we translate et. Who is the direct object of the verb begat earlier in this sentence, close parenthesis.
Showing who this person before them gave birth to.
Yeah, technically, sure, I guess you could translate it, but no. No one wants that.
Oh.
Yeah. So for the lay audience... It's basically what Kip has just showed you using beautiful color coding. is one writer has one way of denoting generations, listing them sons of, sons of, sons of, sons of, and the other author is using not sons of, but so-and-so begat, so-and-so begat, so-and-so begat. So
also, we have bad news.
That's a big thing, and he color-coded it.
Yeah.
We have some bad news.
Oh, and
we have 91 people viewing, but only 33 people have hit like, which means, unfortunately, I like less than half of you, half as well as you deserve.
So, I think I didn't hit like.
You all got bilboed.
How dare you?
So hit like everybody, it really does.
So Genesis 10 is tied up neatly by concluding with this same expression that it began with, right? Like, these are the clans of the sons of Noah, according to their generations, in their nations, and from these they spread out, the nations spread out in the land after the flood. Now, this is what it looks like in Hebrew in Genesis 10. But if we take each individual source, we can actually tease out what these looked like, maybe in their original form.
This is the coolest shit.
Written.
DM in his deplorable ilk wing says, "I'm hearing a lot of vowels in these Hebrew words." Yeah, it turns out that Hebrew has always had vowels.
Yeah.
So that's it. But listen, guys, all that to say, the evidence for I've said this in my video, and this is the way I like to express it. The evidence for the documentary hypothesis, or the evidence for source theories, is formidable. Yeah. Like, it's massive. It's
overwhelming.
And it's consistent.
Yeah.
And it just. So to the point of absurdity. So I've taken up enough time. Let's watch the chuckleheads.
Well, before we do that, Rosana Code of Holiness Keller for $4.99 says, "Plans according to their tongue, each begat a new tongue." So I think what we're, but actually,
revolution confirmed.
I think there's actually an interesting thing here in that I think what we're actually seeing here is a separate explanation for the existence of different languages among different people group from what we get in the Tower of Babel story. In the Tower of Babel story, obviously it's an ideology for how this happened, but in this one, I think it's giving us this well, these people have different languages because they have different ancestors who went their separate ways. And granted, it's not as much of an explanation because it doesn't get into stuff like how would that cause different languages, but I think it is at least a nod at the idea that these languages correspond to family ancestry, which, as we now know, isn't really true, but it seems kind of true-ish if you are just naively looking around.
Stronger than magic language confusion.
Yeah, and so I think this is another example of why
some evidence you can trace like human migration to the development of languages. That's why people study like Proto-Indo-European and how it spread. It's
also not an accident that in populations that historically have spoken Semitic languages natively, there's a predominance of the Y chromosome J haplotype. Like, it's not that, language ties one-to-one with ancestry, but people groups tend to stick together and they tend to keep speaking languages with continuity, which does mean that, you actually do get genetic evidence of groups of people that were originally identified on linguistic grounds. And so it's also why we can trace back various migrations, like the migration of Phoenicians into North Africa, which left behind a island of J haplotypes in the Y chromosomes of the North Africans that normally wouldn't be there without that migration of Phoenicians, who indeed spoke a Semitic language. Yeah. It all ties together, unless, of course, you want to be biblical literalist, in which case none of it makes any sense.
Yeah, and one of the things that's so cool about this to me is this is really giving you more context. Historically, these tribes developed out of regional Canaanite people, and regardless of what circumstances led them to it, over time they began to band together and develop shared narratives and pass along oral traditions and develop sort of an identity that was different than the clans around them. Mm-hmm. And there may be some historical root to, we came out from Egyptian oppression. Hey, they were living under Egyptian hegemony for a lot of the time, so maybe they got rid of a regional ruler or something. Cool, not a problem. But what you're seeing with these different accounts of like the descendancy is you've got two versions of like an oral history. And the writer, again, this is an anthology, is going, instead of just having one version followed by another version, that's clunky. Let's just try to stitch them together so there's more of a flow there. Because remember, like, average person didn't have their own copy of these scrolls. No. You would listen to people reading them, or you would, if you were very privileged, you would be able to like copy them yourself. But most of the time you would just hear it orally read to you. So you're not going to be sitting there, unless you have an eidetic memory, you're not going to sit there and go, oh wait, these slightly conflict. Nobody cared.
No.
All right, I'm going to hit.
I just want to say finally, if this is something people want to go into more in depth on, check out my video series, responding to inspiring philosophy. There's, like I said, there's almost 3 hours there of information about the documentary.
Linked in the description. Click on it. Go there. Yeah.
Hypothesis.
I actually rewatched some of those this week. Somebody had came up with like a really interesting question on Twitter that I responded to. I'm like, I know Kip has done a video on this because I remember the visuals. Yeah. And so I went digging until I found it. And I still think like maybe you should consider like retitling those because
I probably should. Easier. Those videos I don't make a dime on, by the way, because I use super cool music in them from like the Crystal Method and from Thy Catafalque and from my favorite
that'll
Norwegian
take that monetization away
metal
real
band.
Fast.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But it was so worth it.
That's why this channel has music primarily done original by Beethoven. So that's one of the reasons.
I haven't listened to the Crystal Method in a while.
All right, here we go. Let's get some more CMI in here. Dave just finished telling us that it's ridiculous that evangelicals take any of this seriously.
Of course, other New Testament speakers, writers said the same thing. Moses is the author of the Pentateuch, right? Another support for Mosaic authors.
Right. And they clearly knew, right?
Yeah.
They knew.
The thing is, that's one of those arguments that only works if you already accept the argument in the first place, right? If I already accept that, yes, the Bible, every time it tells a story that is not presented internally as fictional, like the parables of Jesus, which are internally supposed to be fictional, right? But every other time it tells a story that's not in the narrative supposed to be fictional, I have to believe that it's actually true, regardless of any outside evidence, regardless of even internal textual contradictions. Then sure, of course, the fact that the New Testament authors call these books the books of Moses is an indication. But further, even then, is it really that strong of an indication that they thought this? Because if I call something, if I identify a story by a main character in it, right? Like Disney is currently calling the 9-number Star Wars movies the Skywalker Saga. Luke Skywalker didn't write those movies.
And is only sometimes in them.
Right. No one named Skywalker was involved with the writing or production or anything in those movies, for the most part at least. Maybe there was some like gaffer or something who just happened to be named Skywalker. But like there was the primary creative talent there was no one named Skywalker. Because sometimes you refer to works by major aspects of them, like a main character, and Moses is pretty important. And while he doesn't really occur much in Genesis, he occurs in the rest of them. And also, he's the one who is delivering all the law codes, which are the important part. And really, you can kind of think of Genesis as like the prologue to Exodus. Because ultimately, the stuff were all like the ritual stuff, the rules that the early Hebrews are going to be living by according to this text. All that stuff is the stuff that's actually going to have an impact on a day-to-day life of someone who's trying to follow this code of texts. The rest of that is just background for how we got there.
Yeah, and I really feel like there's something lost in the way that like Latin and some of the other traditions have decided to name those books, because the tradition in like Judaism is you name a book after like the first prominent word of like the first verse of a book. And so Genesis is the beginning, or at the commencement, Bereshit, because that's the first significant word. Exodus isn't named that in Hebrew because it's Shemot, because it opens with a list of names of sons of Jacob that went down to Egypt. So that's letting you know, this is the start of the next section that begins with this phrase. Then there's, Vayikra, which is Leviticus, but only the first several chapters are like laws. That phrase comes from "and he called," referring to God. God called Moses over to the tent and started giving him instructions or whatever. Then you have in the wilderness or Numbers. And it's like, well, yeah, there's census stuff in there, but it's really talking about their journey through the wilderness, among other things.
Remember that time on Twitter where we were watching some guy beef with some rabbi, and he started spelling out the names in English of books of the Torah, but transliterating them into Hebrew, and then pretending that somehow meant that he knew what he was talking about? Because I sure do.
He was translating the Latin names into Hebrew?
He would write down...
Wait, what?
He wrote down, Genesis in Hebrew letters while trying to flex his knowledge of the Bible on a rabbi. That. And I just looked... I wasn't physically in the presence of Ashani, but I sent this to her. I'm like, did he just do it? Did he just spell out Genesis in Hebrew?
Yeah. He took the letters G-N-S.
Yep.
Which, we know in English is Genesis.
Yep.
And put that in Hebrew, and I was, oh my god! It took me a minute to figure out what the hell they were trying to say. Because I don't know what this is gibberish. Is this yeah? But also Deuteronomy, people refer to that as the second law, but it's just words because it says, "And God spoke these words."
Yeah.
To Moses saying,
or Moses spoke these words.
All right, let's get a little bit more CMI in here.
Yeah.
Does that mean that Moses wrote Genesis without reference to any previous information? Right. No, not necessarily. That's not what we're saying. Yeah. Genesis.
Well, that's right. You had the secret tablets.
Yeah, so
Adam and Noah's secret tablets,
which is collected by Noah, right?
Really means that what they're saying is that there is a documentary thing going on. It's just that the redactor and one of the authors is Moses, which is.
Because, it's a weird hybrid I know if space is a premium on an arc, the first thing I want to do is take a pile of, clay.
Oh, yeah. It's very important.
But hold on. Now, I've never been to the Ark Encounter, but correct me if I'm wrong, the library that scrolls. Noah... Yeah, has scrolls, right? Mm-hmm.
A technology which was unknown until hundreds of years after the alleged setting. Yeah. People just forgot how to make scrolls, even though Noah had a whole boat full of them. And then they rediscovered that exact technology later.
I was going to make a joke about skinning the dinosaurs to make scrolls, but then I was like, nobody does that. Nobody skins reptiles.
Honestly, though, based on the pictures I've seen, I feel like there was a lost opportunity there for Noah to, put together just a really fine wine collection.
Well, see,
yes,
he started that right after he got off of the ark, right? That's the first thing he does.
It was like, my God, why did I bring along all this parchment? I could have had wine bottles this whole time.
Well, I will say,
if you spent the last year of your life cooped up on a boat with a bunch of stinky animals in your family, the first thing you're going to do is get hammered. Stay that way
and naked.
Hey, it was his son who got him naked. Son uncovered it.
No, his son just walked in on him being naked.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Make him naked, So.
Christopher Sanford for £5.
He had to get naked, man.
Says, my sister once put on a class.
Well, it was hot.
My sister once put on a class that these that Ilias wrote the Iliad. I think it was thesis. I guess these guys' literary competency is the same as a 9-year-old. Yeah, basically. Well, and the thing is, one of the things you notice is that they don't really go and take a look at the text and say why they think that there's a literary consistency where other people see divergence in literary styles. They're not doing that, right? They're just referencing things like, yeah, but, Paul said, okay, great.
Okay.
So even, I'll just say this, even more sophisticated approaches. Like in that video, the last video in my series is basically responding to Inspiring Philosophy's arguments for the consistency of the Pentateuch. But even there, it's hilarious because when he talks about, oh, look at all the similarity of the language between this part in Genesis and this later part in Genesis and Exodus, I'm like, dude, when you divide it up according to the sources, what you're dealing with is one of the sources.
Yeah.
Like it's the same. It's so dumb.
What do you mean the J author was consistent with himself?
Yeah.
The E author was consistent with himself? I can't believe.
All right, I'm going to hit
Crazy,
play.
eh? Yeah.
Those narratives of historical events that occurred before Moses.
Yeah.
Before he was born, long before he was born.
Yeah.
Moses may very well have had access to patriarchal records and or reliable oral traditions of those events.
I'm just going to take a drink for these reliable patriarchal records from apparently before the flood that somehow survived. It's dumb.
Should I say something about reliable oral traditions?
Sure,
in a few sentences.
Oral traditions is kind of a oxymoron,
like one of the things. Listen, one of the things that we've discovered in modern studies of ongoing oral cultures is that literacy actually helps to remap the brain in a direction towards consistency that just doesn't exist among people who can't read.
Roasting a Code of Holiness Keller for $4.99 says, speaking of Moses, who was the unnamed pharaoh in Exodus and why was he unnamed? Now, this is my suspicion. I'm going to see what my guess is. I suspected he was unnamed because there wasn't an actual identifiable historical pharaoh that could be realistically tied to the story. And so the author just didn't bother trying.
You want to know, here's a really good example of oral tradition. It shifts real damn fast. Most of us were here on stream 2 years ago when we were reading through Kent Hovind's dissertation. And that was when Kent had a footnote in one of his little citations where he didn't list the thing he was quoting. He just put a note that said KJV get title. Over time, that has become corrupted into KJV get book title, which was not the original citation that he listed. It was KJV get title. And that's not even like 2 years. And we were there.
But Kip, what do you think about...
Dapper renamed the stream KJV get title. So, oral tradition.
Kip, what do you think about my idea that there just wasn't a historical pharaoh that could be easily tied to this, so the author just didn't try?
I think that's most probable. Just didn't try. Just didn't care.
Yeah. Does it matter which pharaoh it is?
Right. No. It absolutely doesn't. And
clearly,
it
was Tutankhamun's dad.
Akhenaten?
That
seems especially unlikely, but okay.
I know. Well, that's the way people are like, but he was a monotheist, and it's like, not
kind of.
Really?
I mean,
no.
Realistically,
he was a strict henotheist, I would argue, but
realistically, I don't think Moses is portrayed as a monotheist either. But
no. Can I? There's one thing that I'd like to say about just to piggyback on Vishanti's point about a modern illustration of orality. One of the things that I like to draw attention to is, have you ever heard this expression about putting your John Henry on a document as a way of
your John
you haven't?
John Hancock.
Well, that's the actual that's where it originates, right?
It's a Canadian thing where they've changed it to John Henry.
Maybe it's a Canadian thing because it occurs with considerable frequency. And this has to do just with the ways in which like these names sound similar to us. They both, there's this connection to American folklore, and they get smashed together, right? And it creates basically like a long-standing idiom that has nothing at all to do with the meaning behind the original, right? Yeah. So
the only reason it's a phrase is because John Hancock was super extra when he signed the freaking document, and everyone's like, "Wow, check out this guy!" Like stupid extra.
By the way, it just makes me think. It just made me think of the Great Simpsons episode where they flash back to John Hancock spelling his name in the snow with his with his key string.
I'm gonna hit the play button.
Yes.
Sorry.
In that case, such records would have certainly been preserved by writing, probably on clay tablets. That's the way they used to do it a long time ago.
Yeah.
Do you have any evidence of any Northwest Semitic languages being preserved as cuneiform? Was like, I thought it was like Akkadian and a few other
Ugaritic's a Northwest Semitic language. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So, but it's an interesting, like, it's super cool. I think I'm just fascinated by the utility of like cuneiform, because it served all sorts of different languages, right? Well, like Ugaritic is that's totally different from Akkadian.
That's true of many other writing systems, right? Like the Latin alphabet has done that. The Arabic alphabet has done that. The Chinese writing system has done that. The Devanagari script that was created for Sanskrit. Yeah. I mean, that has been adapted to encode languages as different as actual Indo-European languages like Hindi, as well as Sino-Tibetan languages that are more closely related to Han Chinese, like Tibetan. So it's actually a pretty common feature once a script gets around that it is adapted to whatever happens to be necessary. It's like, you know what?
Yeah.
If you wanted to come up with a cuneiform mode for English,
but amazing, right?
It is really cool.
Yeah, and it's like, it's also, you can always tell the shortcomings because orthography, there are certain things it just lacks for, like communicating a sound. Like when the Spanish came and invaded the New World, they learned Nahuatl, but they were trying to write it down, and the only language they had to really write it down with was Spanish, medieval Spanish, and they got close.
Yeah, kind of.
So I just, I'll just point out here at this point, and a bit of an absurdity that I mention from time to time. Our biblical texts were not preserved in cuneiform, right?
No.
But it's even worse than that. Our biblical texts were not preserved in Hebrew script. Our biblical texts were preserved in Aramaic script, which I think is pretty telling as to where they came from and how old they are. Because the Aramaic script was basically, adopted in the Persian period by, Jewish communities who decided we got to start writing some of this stuff down.
Yeah.
Can you clarify for everybody watching what the difference is between those two? Because we typically just kind of say it interchangeably, like, oh, it's the Hebrew text, but
so
Aramaic script.
The Hebrew script is so this is we see examples of this in like Iron Age epigraphic finds in like Palestine and Israel, and it was used widely by all sorts of different Canaanite people, the Moabites, the Edomites, the Phoenicians, the Israelites, right? And it's a 22 letter script, and it bears a close relation to the Aramaic script, which was used by, like I said, the Persians. But there are obvious differences between them, right? Like they're related, but they are different. The Aramaic script also has 22 letters, but that's what you see more like our Hebrew Bibles. The stuff that I showed you on the screen, which was drawn from the Hebrew Bible, is the quote unquote square Aramaic script that we find in basically the Second Temple period.
Hey, quick shout out to the Samaritans, whose alphabet that they use for Hebrew is in fact descended directly from the older Hebrew alphabet. So, quick shout out for those guys.
Proto-Hebrew.
Yes and no, because one of the interesting things we see taking place in the Second Temple period, you like right around the late 3rd, early 2nd century, is the adoption of a script that is identified as quote unquote Paleo-Hebrew, which looks an awful lot like the old Hebrew script, but was actually introduced at a later point in time as a means of lending authority or archaizing some of these texts. This is like you see this on the Hasmonean coinage, right? They've adopted this. It's a later form, but it's very clearly an effort to try and reproduce like these old scripts. This is how
in my book that still counts.
Samaritan Pentateuch. Yeah,
of course it does.
I suppose, but it's.
Look, the fact that a script took a hiatus in use and then is readopted, still in my mind means that that's still the same script being used. Like if I just decided that I was going to start writing letters in Sumerian in cuneiform, and now that idea spreads and becomes popular, that's still cuneiform. You might want to call it neo-cuneiform or whatever.
Like it'd be different though, right? Like I think that's important to note is that the so-called Paleo-Hebrew. I guess so.
Does Martin Scullion have copies of the Samaritan Pentateuch in his holdings?
I don't think so.
Also, real quick, Asta Reverse Lamed Ryu for $4.99 says, yes, the subject that inspired my name. Anything dumber than pre-Yiddish yet? No. I can't imagine that we'll get anything dumber than pre-Yiddish in this. But also, hey, it is about break time. I'm gonna refill this coffee, because right now it is mostly empty, and it is of the exact wrong temperature, which is to say room temperature. This coffee is only good at temperature extremes. Did it have hot or really cold coffee? Room temperature? The worst. All right, so, yep, we will be back in just a few minutes. In the meantime, please enjoy the musical stylings of one Beethoven while we get refills and whatnot. And we are back. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for sticking with me. Those of you who did, which looks like almost everyone. So thank you. I appreciate that. Now that we're back, real quick, I want to make it known that this channel is almost entirely supported directly through the efforts of viewers, whether it be through Patreon or the channel memberships, super chats, gifted memberships. All that stuff helps. If you're looking to support because you like what I do, you're not currently supporting financially, and also you can afford it. That's an important thing. If you cannot afford this, this should not be your priority. This is part of your entertainment budget, right? Don't take it out of your food budget or your rent budget or whatever. But yeah, one of the best ways is Patreon. That's where I get to keep the most. That starts at $1 a month, goes all the way to $100 a month if you want to. I guess technically you can give more than that, but it seems a little crazy. You can also get a 15% discount if you go annually instead of monthly. Additionally, there's the memberships. That's the little join button right below this. You can get, that starts at $1.99 a month. You can also go all the way to $20 a month if you want to there. Bits of inanimate, I got cut off, let me check. Inanimate Life for oh yeah, Inanimate Life, that was a good one. Just give it a membership and it went to Old Man Writer. Thank you very much, I'll take a drink. Both of those give you early access to videos. There are currently, I believe, almost two dozen or so videos that are just available for you to watch right now that won't be coming out publicly for months and months and months. I think it's 5 or 6 months ahead right now. I believe I'm good for like 31 more weeks, as I believe I counted out recently. Wow. Yeah, I've got 31 weeks of content currently in the can. So it's quite a bit. It's more than half a year, you know?
Holy cow.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm charging hard, especially for the people who are paying me for it. They get way more videos way faster than anyone else. So if a monthly or an annual thing, though, isn't your style, there's also a lot of other options. Obviously, there's someone really loud driving some kind of vehicle right outside. It's really annoying. Sorry about that. But yes, there are other options, like there's a merch store. Right below this video, you should see a shelf with all sorts of t-shirts and other products. If none of those are products that you're interested in, if you click, it will bring you to the bigger shop and you can search around for other items. There's also a wish list. I have my wish list in the description, one for Benthoven listed in the description, also Benthoven's Patreon, as well as Vishanti's wish list is also in the description. So that's the wish lists are basically, hey, if you want to give me a really big hit of like happy brain chemicals for a day, it's a great way to do it. Or in some cases for much more than a day, right? Like if I get some like ramen, it's gonna be weeks of every once in a while. I'm like, oh yeah, nice. Fan got me ramen. I have a nice fun lunch because that's what I do with the ramen. I have it for lunch.
I get very sustained happy chemicals because there's a lot of items on my wish list that I use like regularly, almost daily, and that's always like dopamine go burr.
So if, however, financial support isn't in the cards for you, or you're just not interested in doing it, that's great too. If you're enjoying this, whether or not you're helping out financially, please hit like, please share this, put comments in, watch a few of my videos in a row. All of that really helps. You know, the start of this year was a little rough in terms of how the algorithm was treating my videos. Been turning around a little bit last couple of weeks, so that's great. And I want to keep that momentum going, and that is helped by you guys watching videos, watch them all the way through, watch more in a row. All right, we got a few things to read here. So let's see. Savage Pre-Yiddish Cobra gifted 5 memberships. They went to Noah Erard, Landon Knoll, Vathalis, Uomovero, Jason Hyatt, and I believe that's it for that. Thank you very much. I'll take 5 drinks. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
You got the single one for Old Man Writer, correct?
Yes, I did. I got that earlier.
Okay, just make sure.
Demon is the portable Ilkwing for $2 says, this is supposed to be entertainment with a bunch of turtles. Well, I mean, I hope it's at least infotainment.
Are you not entertained?
Yeah. Astroverse Lamed Ryu for $4.99 says, well, it says Thoth, although I suspect it's supposed to actually be a face. What is this? Or what's this? A bag of suspiciously shaped sticks? Must be an AIG, and we'll take a drink. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's probably intended to be the... Ooh?
Yeah, but
for those...
Technically, it says Thoth.
Does say Thoth.
If anyone showed up here from Blasphemer's Bible earlier today, I will be disappointed if I don't see any super chats about AIG being a bag full of hands.
All right, I'm going to hit play finally. I think we're going to get a third week out of this video because we are going super slow today.
Sorry, my presentation
well, then just play and don't
handed
stop
down from father to son, from family to family, via the line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so on. You start through the flood with Noah and Shem.
And
there are 11 verses in Genesis that read, "These are," or "This is the book of," the generations of.
We just looked at that.
Yeah, guess what?
We just looked at that, and not only are those sections actually strong evidence for the documentary hypothesis. Also, Kip, where was the word "book" in those? Because I don't remember that.
No, it's not there, right?
Yeah, they're just making that up.
You don't get that kind of language until you get to the Book of Deuteronomy.
I'm just kidding. I was mistaken. Go ahead. Don't interrupt.
Okay.
For my sake.
There's 11 statements like that.
You know what? We're going to take a drink for them just making up words in the Bible that just aren't there.
You're the one stopping
it. The Hebrew word Toldoth translates generations.
It's not Toldoth.
That's the word for.
I shouldn't make fun of people for.
Stop pausing. I'll just read.
Here's the thing, though. It's worth pausing for because look, if you're going to present yourself as an expert in something, and then you get very basic things wrong, you should be called out for that. That TH is not there because it's a th sound. It's there because the tav used there is it's indicating that that's one of the quote-unquote dark or emphatic consonants, which, yeah, that distinction is basically gone in modern Hebrew. But it wasn't... So it was probably a pharyngealized alveolar fricative.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which...
Oh,
I'm sure those words mean things to people, just not anyone who's listening to me.
You're not beating the linguist charges.
I never do.
I have to just say this because this happened last week, and I laughed my ass off because of it. But there's a certain now disgraced Egyptologist who likes to who likes to fancy himself as a philosopher, and he made a whole video last week about the Tukakyu fallacy.
Oh,
I am not kidding.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be.
Tukakyu.
That sounds
Vishanti.
Way dirtier.
Generations can also mean origins.
Allow me
or
to
history.
correct. I wanted to say that I misspoke. The word sefer actually is in the text. It's in Genesis 5:1.
But is it in
Sefer Toledot Adam?
Okay.
This is the book of the generations of Adam.
It's not a consistent feature of all the genealogies every time they say this is the generations of. So, yeah. All right. Let's see. Asta reverse Lamed Ryu, which I still feel like it should be Lamed, but you know what? When Asta Ryu put in when they put in the IPA, they use the regular old E and not the epsilon. So I gotta say Lamed. That's what they indicated. Anyway, it says what it means is that Dapper is a linguist, like AIG is a bag of hands. I'm not gonna read out the whole part, but I'll take a drink for it.
Yeah, you're not beating the charges.
Why? Because I can fluidly turn that weird parse thing into actual spoken English?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, you know what? Being able to write out a parse is a really handy thing for understanding different grammatical forms. So...
Hey, we could be getting back to the video if you want to crack the whip.
No, we can't, because for 100 flatworms, I guess? 10 flatworms, Alexander Zagrodsky says, here's for our linguist and language enthusiast. Yes, I'm a language enthusiast, see?
Or even family history.
Whatever their unit.
And each verse comes either before or after a description of the historical events that involved the person that's named. This is the generation of so-and-so. The most likely explanation is that Adam, Noah, Shem, etc., each wrote an account of the events that occurred either right before or during his lifetime. Right.
Why is that the most likely explanation?
That seems very likely before the invention of writing, doesn't it?
Even if we ignore the invention of writing, why does it seem more likely that a section of a work titled this is the stuff about this guy. Has to have been written about by that guy.
Yeah, right.
I mean, if anything, shouldn't it say something like, hey, this is my book. I'm Adam. I wrote this thing. If you really want to identify some line in the text as identifying an author, it should do that.
That would have helped.
Right?
And this is what the Second Temple Jewish authors really keyed in on, because all of a sudden you had a whole bunch of books coming out that said, this is the work of Adam. When I was in the garden, this is what happened. And
first person narrative? Oh my goodness.
Lots of that. Sorry. I feel like it would be a tragedy to miss Sir Derpy Mister's very clever little chat there about the Tukaku fallacy being a fallacy.
Dapper's pelagic.
I'm 51, guys.
You're still at
What's
heart.
your excuse for
At
everything
heart,
now?
you're still like 9.
Yes.
Dapper's pelagic PhD for 100 Argentinian pesos says, it was my understanding that the TH comes from the soft tav, which might have been pronounced TH at some point, but now it's just a regular old tav. An emphatic would be written with that. Actually, that I might be misremembering, and you may be correct about that. I would have to double check.
It's, from what I understood, it's closer to the way that the Dutch say the TH, where it sounds more like a D to us, like a soft D, rather than a.
It's more like a duh.
Look, I am not a Hebraist, so I very well may have misremembered that.
And Moses, it's kind of like a signature almost, or a heading, that kind of thing.
I'll give him heading. It's nothing like a signature. I'm going to take a drink for that.
Moses, same thing with Moses. Under the infallible inspiration of the Holy Spirit, selected, compiled, and edited these to produce Genesis. It's in its current, present cohesion.
I'm calling it.
The thing is, look, you can assume an infallible inspiration, but if you don't assume that, it would be hard to come to that conclusion because there are obvious contradictions. For instance, like we just went over, who sold Joseph to the Egyptians?
Hello.
Yeah.
Honestly, they could have done so much better too. And I'll draw your attention again to the Second Temple period recognition of this, where, the Book of Jubilees actually has the stuff getting written down on golden tablets that exist in heaven by the angel of the presence, right? Or even better, the Temple Scroll, as I mentioned quite often, purports to be a direct revelation written by Yahweh.
Maybe it is.
I mean,
of form. Exactly.
It should.
Yeah, Genesis doesn't show a progress from idolatry to monotheism, or as Wellhausen.
No, it actually doesn't.
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't. You know why?
Because it's all polytheistic the whole way.
It's all polytheism in there. And there's,
isn't so? See, I don't know any of the Scandinavian words or languages well enough to make sure I get that right. But isn't the Lod in the same as the Spanish intervocalic D like a I don't
know what that alchemy, like sorcery nonsense is going on in that super chat, but you can have it.
Look, I get the IPA. I get the IPA, but I don't know enough about any Scandinavian languages to actually tell you anything.
Where's Matt Monger when we need him? I bet he could make heads or tails of that.
There was actually one time someone really commented me on my pronunciation of a Dutch word, a Dutch name, because the guy who I was responding to was pronouncing it like it was French or something, and I'm like, dude, if you're gonna try and pronounce it in some original pronunciation and you can't get it right, just say it like the name is pronounced in English, right? Don't go overboard if you can't get it right. I was like, wow, how long have you been studying Dutch? I'm like, dude, I just looked up the IPA for this name on Wikipedia and I just went with that. We did a really good job. Yeah, that's because it's the International Phonetic Alphabet. That's the point of it. If you know it well enough, you can pronounce any phrase reasonably well without actually knowing anything about the language involved. Yeah.
I'm with some awe who says, yes, the two religion types, idolatry or monotheism.
Those are the options. Savage Pre-Yiddish Cobra for $2 says polytheism all the way down. But also the idea of the progression from animism to polytheism to monotheism is a long abandoned idea in like historical studies. Like no one thinks that that's actually how religions work anymore. Basically, that idea is only something that you can find viable if you also have this sort of old-fashioned idea that just religions are anything that are close enough to Protestant Christianity that we kind of recognize them as being that same kind of broad category. Because that's also how, like, religious studies started. Like, what's a religion? And what it came down to originally was just anything that's kind of like Protestant Christianity in most cases. Which, obviously, that's a bad definition, right? And the farther away you get from the center of Protestant Christianity, the harder it is to identify which things count as a religion.
Yeah, it is. I was going to say, we're kind of at the point now where the answer to the question of what is a religion is pretty much anything you want it to be.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
It's that thing that you want to call your religion, and that's your religion.
Yep.
Really.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say those things like a community of adherents, ritual practices, sacred, profane distinction, some supernatural beliefs, but that's a grab bag of common features, not all of which are present in every of all the things that we call religions. And so you could say, well, it has to have some of these features. Maybe.
I get really... I've become very pedantic about the way people discuss some ritual language because this idea of like sacred and profane, the connotation of profane is that it's dirty and bad, evil, wrong, sin somehow. It just, the word means common.
Yeah.
There's special and common.
Yeah.
Like that's the closest I can get you in English. Special and common.
Like,
and that doesn't mean bad. It's just
to give a Christian example, like an altar in a more liturgically oriented church is treated in some ways as a table at which a meal is prepared, because that's the point of the altar, is to prepare something for everyone to consume communally. But it's certainly not the table that you're just going to sit around at having like Sunday brunch, because it's the altar. It's the sacred table. The profane table those are the tables down in like the, the rectory area where you're going to hang out and have your post-mass or post-liturgy or whatever lunch with everybody. Those are the profane tables. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just not the sacred table where you do the sacred thing. Anyway, Archival Bob for 20 secs, thank you very much. I always do appreciate it when people send me secs. Says, thank you all for the stream. It's really appreciated. Well, thank you for coming. I am having fun with it. And I think we're going to have another one of these. So, Kip, you're on the hook for at least one more.
I guess so. Oh no!
Evolutionary, scale requires. Yeah. It shows that the Bible begins with an original revelation from God.
It doesn't, but okay.
Right? Of God, which was later rejected to the point that the Hebrew nation itself descended into idolatry, and so was given over to captivity by God. It's completely reversed from.
Yeah, that's
Hebrew cope for why like
I was about to say that exact same thing. It's just cope for bad things having happened, despite the fact that you guys think you have the bestest ever God. Take a drink. And look, a big part of it is that the prophetic answer to this alleged falling away is always hew more closely to our religious traditions, which has the double benefit of, one, providing an explanation that doesn't involve our God sucking, and also helps reinforce the ethnic character of the group of people to whom it's written that help them during this period of captivity or conquest or just things not going very well. And
also, evangelicals do this today. They'll say, oh, remember Hurricane Katrina was heading straight for, New Orleans because it's so depraved and sinful. And then they just kind of ignore the fact that it swerved and hit Biloxi, like, way harder. They still do stuff like that today.
No, you see,
a natural disaster happened because of people being sinful and depraved. Let's pray it away.
While Biloxi is lesser known, it's way more depraved.
Apparently.
Yeah, that's the actual thing.
Their fewer number of casinos and historical attractions are far more degenerate than
the South Geek Insurrection.
Far less witchcraft.
The South Geek Insurrection for €5 says, I also know a lot about IPA. Love me some craft beer. I haven't actually had an IPA beer
you're
in
the
quite
first
a while.
one to make that joke ever. Ha 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 ha.
You know what though?
I had a hazy IPA on Thursday when I went out for lunch with my my former mentor, nice. Professor Martin Abegg. It's nice.
Right on.
You know what? I want to get a nice IPA and have it with some pad thai. That's what I want to do. Yeah. Because the acidity of the IPA can help with a lot of the heavier flavors in the IPA. The pad thai. The same reason that you have lime with the pad thai, right? It's because there's a lot of heavy flavors in there, so you want to cut it with some acid. The IPA can serve a similar purpose. All right, here we go.
That's one of
these critics were saying.
Right. Yeah. So what about the different words used for God? That was one of the big deals, big issues there. Yeah. And here it helps to distinguish between names and titles. Now in Genesis chapters...
It doesn't help, though, because the question is, why are there stylistic changes that involve consistent use of different titles or names? Right?
Was Melchizedek a name or a title? I'll wait.
Good question. There's
spoiler alert. No one's been able to figure that one out for 3,000 years.
Yeah. But hey, Jesus and Melchizedek walk into a bar. The bartender says to Jesus, "We don't serve your type here." So Melchizedek leaves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh. Hey, can I just make a fun point about Melchizedek? From an historical perspective, it seems like this name was closely associated with the city that, eventually became Jerusalem.
You mean Jerusalem and Salem are related?
No.
They are. And interestingly enough, David famously had 2 high priests serving in the Jerusalem temple. And one of them was a descendant of Eli, who came out of the Shiloh shrine. And the other one, his name was Zadok. And it sort of looks like maybe if there's an historical kernel to this story, maybe there was an accommodation made with the good people of Salem, Jerusalem, that helped David to just, move in and take over this city here. Just saying.
Seems plausible. Also, Asta Reverse Lamed Ryu says Southgeek's previous super chat based joke is so original it was originally written in Footlark. Nice. But elder or younger? That's the real question.
1 and 2, the word Elohim is used for God 25 times. That word describes an awesome and faithful being having creative and governing power and magic.
No, it just means the really cool God. It's just God, but the best one. It doesn't have anything to do with creation, or it's just
if this was the name, the preferred term used by the priestly writer. These are also texts which were composed at a point in time when a more transcendent view of God came into fashion, as opposed to some of the earlier, much more closely Canaanite sort of perspectives of God. And so actually, again, this isn't helping.
Right, that's one of those things where it's like, it's not only that there are different names and titles used, it's that the names and titles are closely associated with significant differences in the portrayal of God himself, as well as in literary style. So, while it's true that they're one of the easy things that we can pick out, and you can use it like as a rule of thumb, like, hey, if it says Elohim as a rule of thumb, it's probably one of these sources. But that's not the actual reason that the conclusion is reached. That has more to do with things like I was talking about, like the different depictions of how God acts and interacts, different literary styles, different word choice and vocabulary usage. Those things all come together. You can't just see like, oh, well, look, these guys are just basing all of it off of the different names used for God. No, that's not what's happening. No one is basing it on that in isolation.
I don't know anything about paleontology, but I think it probably works analogously with how like index fossils function.
A little bit, yeah. Like,
would I be wrong about that?
It's there's some similarity, right? Where it's not just that we look at the fossil record and say, hey, look, we found this one species in this one layer. I guess that can be used as an index fossil. You have to do a lot more work before you identify an index fossil. You have to actually find it all over the place. You have to find it consistently at a particular vertical section with a wide geographical distribution. There's a lot that goes into selecting index fossils for different strata. You can't just see. oh, well, I found this one particular, like, coccolith, therefore I'm going to say that that's now a new index fossil for this period. It just doesn't work that way. All right, here we go.
Majesty and omnipotence, who's above the material world he created. It's a lofty title. It's a title. It equals God. Right? It's a title. It's like I'm the CEO of the Canadian office. That's my title.
Yeah.
And
we were right. This is the Canadian branch.
It's an appropriate word for Moses to have used for the.
Look, given how many young Earth creationist organizations there are here in the States, you have nothing to worry about when it comes to like being infiltrated with young Earth creationists. Like Canada is doing significantly better on like a per capita creationism front than the U.S. is.
The first factual report of God's creative activities. Now, in Genesis chapter 2, from verse 4 on, the Hebrew uses the letters YHWH, or Yahweh, to refer to God. Sometimes
which for a reason that they never understand becomes a hard J.
Well, I mean, it has to do with things like, Latin and German and whatnot.
Hey. They don't understand.
Oh, yeah, they probably don't.
Why?
Yeah. But then again, I also don't. As long as they don't make that a point, I don't mind that they don't.
This guy must be reading from the same sources as Richard Carrier when it comes to the Old Testament.
Yeah, I was just informed by you earlier that Richard Carrier sees a bunch of crucifixions all through the Old Testament, and I was like, where? And then you gave like some examples, and it's like, nope, that's just not in there. You're just making stuff up, Richard.
Source made it up.
Yep.
Jehovah. It's more often translated Lord in small capitals in our modern translations, and is most commonly it's the most commonly used term.
Is that a typo that English is in lowercase?
What's that? Sorry.
I was just going to say, is that a typo that English is in lowercase?
Probably.
I mean, it's grammatically weird to not capitalize English but capitalize Bibles.
Yeah, it should be the other way around everything.
Right. Is spelled on the next second line down there, so it should be testament, not testament.
Yeah.
There we go. I missed that one.
See, Kip, they're doing worse than you were with your typos, so you're winning.
Right?
Yeah.
Multiple typos just in the same
You're officially doing better than Creation Ministries International. Good job. You made it.
Yay.
You should put that on your CV. Which reminds me, do you remember that time that Kent Hovind was asked where his CV could be found, and he didn't even know what a CV was?
Of course.
And basically, when asked, like, it's the things that you've studied and where you studied, his answer came out as, well, I studied at the School of Hard Knocks with my dad. I'm like, okay, cool.
Sure, buddy. Put that on a job application. No, wait, you don't do that because you're perpetually unemployed.
Well, it's similar to when he was surprised to learn that, normally when you have a PhD that you have some kind of, like, dissertation that's actually published and available to the public, at least through interlibrary loans and whatnot. And so it would have actually seems to be the case is that thing that passes as, his doctoral thesis was actually just some text that he pulled out of the trash. And was like, see, I do have one.
My recent experience has taught me that some dissertations are much more difficult to get your hands on than others.
I mean, that doesn't.
I'll just say that.
Me, but. Dapper's pelagic PhD for 100 Argentinian pesos says, my local JWs told me God's name is Jehovah? That's
Jehovah?
Jehovah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But that's the bilabial fricative. Jehovah. And they witnessed him, so they must be right. That's...
Probably.
I mean, that seems like roughly what you would get if you just read out Jehovah in Spanish, but like you would think there would be some consistency if this is the actual real name of God that God really wants us to use, which is what the JW say. Like, no, you can't use any other name for God. It's Jehovah. That's his real name. It's like, well, then why is it Jehovah in Spanish all of a sudden? Whatever.
6,823 times. It means the one who always was, now is, and ever shall be.
Yeah, I don't think we actually have a really good handle on the etymology of that word, do we?
We do not.
I mean, I'm not going to say it couldn't be that it couldn't be something related to that, but I don't think we can say that it is.
Doesn't seem like that's what it means.
All right. So at best, this is a not impossible meaning, but not a very likely one.
Yep, the reason people are putting in their keys, it's like when you launch nuclear stuff in the movies, people will have the two keys they put in the controller and turn them at the same time to launch the missiles.
Okay.
So we have hyper stupid, let's launch the hyper stupid, everybody put in your authorization key.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Yay. Yeah. Thanks.
It's a bingo related meme. Interestingly enough.
Okay.
And it's a deeply personal name of God.
Does it mean to be deeply personal as a name instead of just personal name?
It's just the name for God.
Look, the name Tim is my deeply personal name.
Y'all don't even know my deeply
Richard.
personal name.
I have a title.
I have.
So it's therefore used in his personal.
Is Dick your deeply personal name? I bet it's Dick, isn't it? It's deeply personal.
I have 3 names, and y'all usually only know at most 2 of them. So, yeah.
I have multiple names as well.
Most of y'all don't know my Hebrew name.
And cosmic relations
my legal name.
Beginning at Genesis 2, verse 4, we read a more detailed account of how God made Adam and Eve.
Yeah, you might be able to say that it's a more detailed account if all you're reading is the NIV that changes the form of the verbs to pluperfect instead of simple past in order to create the sense that it's a more detailed account.
Is this lying, or is this just bad history, or both?
I don't think it's lying. I think they honestly believe
I don't think he's lying.
Because my guess is...
Yeah, I don't think he knows.
Yeah, my guess is these guys are actually getting their theology about how this works directly from the NIV. Because they're the kind of Christians for whom the NIV is very popular. And in case you guys don't know, in Hebrew, there is, the Hebrew verbal system, especially in older texts, is more concerned with aspect than it was with tense. So when we say things like present tense versus past tense and things like that, what we're really usually saying is something more like just perfect versus imperfect aspect and things like that, right? Whether the action is continuous, simple, or already completed at the time of the sentence. And so what the NIV does is it takes this simple aspect, these verbs are in the simple aspect in Genesis 2, and it takes them and puts them into the perfective in English, as well as the past tense, because English has an explicit past tense, creating the pluperfect in English out of a simple non-future verb in Hebrew with a simple aspect that should not be in a perfect aspect in English. But that's what they do anyway, because then it reads like you're zooming in on a particular time. Whereas in the actual Hebrew, it doesn't say anything like that. It just says, now when God created, then it talks about the next thing happening. But in the NIV, it says, when God had created, giving the impression that this is something that happened back in verse 1, and now we're just talking about what actually happened on day 6. But that's not what's actually in the Hebrew. And I don't think this guy's lying about it. But I have trouble saying that the translators of the NIV didn't know that was at least motivated reasoning. Well, I'm not going to say they necessarily lied.
Yeah, like Tim McClellan said this week, is that the NIV is an especially bad translation if you want to know closer to what the Hebrew is talking about, because they add words to fit a theology.
Yes,
it's dishonest. So
they're taking advantage of this fact, right? That there is no clear pluperfect in ancient Hebrew. But what's often missed is that when the authors want to make this statement, there's ways to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
And they don't in this case.
And actually, no. And you can actually see instances in Genesis 2. It's right there in the text where the author has intended, like they've intentionally made slightly different expressions in an effort to communicate that this is what they're doing. You see one in Genesis 2 verse 9. Is it no, it's 2 verse 10, sorry. The river flowed out from Eden. is structured in a different way than virtually all the other verbal constructions in that story, as a way to indicate that this is something that we're reflecting back on as having already happened.
Reverse Lumade Ryu for $4.99 says each level of stupid also requires more keys as a bias correcting measure and an affirmation of groupthink. Of course, that was a joke. Savage Pre-Yiddish Cobra for $2 says deeply surname. And Goop23 for $2 says AIG is a bag of deeply personal names. I'll take a drink for that.
Yes! Nice.
All right, here we go.
And the setting he prepared for them, the details about the world before it was corrupted by sin, etc. Here, they were meant to live and work.
There's serious differences, right, between these stories.
I talked a little bit about created is different. It's
just the shape and the appearance of the pre-created world too. Yeah. I talked about this a little bit just this last week on Deep Drinks podcast, and I'll probably go back there and talk a little bit more about this if people are interested. But as an example, the world, like if you look closely at the story in Genesis chapter 2, the world is like the pre-created world is a barren wasteland. The pre-created world in Genesis 1 is a chaotic sea, right? Like these are totally different.
In a loving covenantal fellowship with him and each other. It was entirely
why does the end of like Genesis 3, 4, 5, whatever say, and then people began to call upon the name of Adonai.
It's actually not all that clear that there's supposed to be a loving covenant between God and Adam and Eve.
No.
I mean, I don't want to get a whole lot into it, but Genesis 2 does not present God as the friend of humanity, shall we say. He seems to be a somewhat antagonistic character who is concerned that humanity not make too much of themselves, rather than a friend and ally of humans. In fact, the argument could be made that the serpent is actually the friend of humans. This is more like
the
a
point of
Prometheus
creation.
story.
The point of creation of humankind in Genesis 1 is to look after God's garden.
Yeah, God doesn't want to do the work.
That's what he wants. Nope.
It's like, look, I made it, someone else can take care of it. And, I mean, I'm not going to say that that's some kind of malevolent relationship, but it's certainly not the thing that this guy's talking about.
But honestly, I don't want to do your
work. Moses should have used that YHWH, Yahweh, Jehovah, in writing this section of Genesis. In Genesis 2, Yahweh is joined to Elohim to form a compound name.
He misspells the Tetragrammaton. Yeah. What are you doing? Yo-ho.
Yo-ho.
Yeah, yo-ho, that's what we're going to go with.
God.
The real question is, how many of these slides are not going to have typos at this point?
In our modern Bibles, English Bibles, Lord God. This identifies the covenant God Yahweh as being one and the same Elohim, the Almighty Creator.
Gee, I wonder if that was intentional.
It's almost like, hey, maybe when you're stitching together different sources that use different titles or names of God, and you want to make it explicit to your readers that this is the same character in the narrative that you're now compiling, you might throw in a verse about how they're the same guy.
Couldn't be.
Yeah, that's impossible.
Yeah, I'm calling that bad history.
There's no logical reason, particularly when examining the terms used for God, to ascribe this account to any other author or a multiple.
But I beg to differ, sir.
Listen. So as I go to great lengths to point out in my video series, it's not just the names, right?
That's the point.
Like, this God is totally different in terms of how he acts and how he creates, and the outcomes and the shape of the world is different, and the order of creation is different. And
there's a problem, though. If they don't strawman the documentary hypothesis, then it will seem plausible. That's the thing with creationists all over the place, right? Creationists are almost like physically incapable of representing the claims of other people as those people would recognize them. And that's
because I don't understand them.
True.
Right.
Honestly, I just whatever, it's fine.
And that's one of the things is like, at least when I'm talking to creationists and I try to explain what I think they're trying to say in terms of creationism, the usual response I get is, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. I usually from creationists get confirmation that what I am presenting as their argument is, broadly speaking at least, what their argument is. But you almost never see that the other way around. Whenever a creationist goes on about the Bible or evolution or the Big Bang, it's almost always a horrible straw man. It's like a theme.
You could make an entire sheaf offering out of the straw men.
Oh, apparently if you misspelled...
Pretty sure we could do a creationist count the Omer with all their straw men.
Savage Pre-Yiddish Cobras for $5 says he misspelled Genesis 2. GDO will be... Godot will be rather cross. Yeah.
Godot.
Yeah, that...
I appreciate him paying tribute to the crucifixions in the Old Testament as uncovered.
Author. It was logical, the names he chose.
Absolutely,
right? Yeah. The same principles apply in the rest of Genesis and throughout the Old Testament. This JDP system, it's self-contradictory.
How is it self-contradictory?
It explains the text better than your univocal, came down from heaven as one perfect entity thing.
You can't just say it's self-contradictory without pointing something out, right?
So there's a misunderstanding here too that frequently gets made. 400 years ago, when Jean Struck first saw this kind of stuff, or Ibn Ezra way back, 1,000 years ago, when they first started noticing the name difference. It started as, everywhere where we see the name Yahweh must be a different author than where we see the name Elohim. But the ways in which scholars read the text have progressed a little bit in 400 years.
No.
To the point where just very simply, the way this works in terms of dividing the Yahwist from the so-called Elohist or the priestly writer is that for the Yahwist, the name of Yahweh is revealed in Genesis 4. For the Elohist or the priestly writer, the name of Yahweh is not revealed to the characters in the story. Let's be clear about this. Until Exodus chapter 3. So that's the difference. And what that means is sometimes the narrator will use the two names, but importantly, the characters in the story are the ones who, make this distinction. Does everybody understand that?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
For $4.99, Asta Reverse Lamed Ryu says, but Kip, religion doesn't change? That's too science. Yeah.
Its proponents actually need to break verses into sections, or even credit parts of sentences. Usually not right that use one or more term for.
It's like a section of verses. It's usually not just one.
Yeah. Now the break,
and it's definitely not mid-sentence.
I think what he's complaining about is occasionally you might get a place where where the versification breaks doesn't exactly line up with where the sources likely break, and so for one verse you get a verse that is the end of one section and the beginning of another section. See, they're breaking apart this verse. I guess this one where there's a break in the middle of it, but it's not based on just do they realize that the versification is a late thing that for thousands of years no one would have known about?
I think something else that
the Hebrew scrolls are written as paragraphs. It's not line, line. It's like paragraphs, and then there's breaks within a line, and then there's what we would call a paragraph break.
I think something though too. Sorry, are you done, Vish? I didn't mean to interrupt.
My bad. Keep going.
One of the things that something that he might be pointing to is that there are occasions within the text where an editor has come in and provided a parenthetical statement or a gloss in an effort to try and tie a couple of ideas together, right? But by and large, scholars are mostly working with like these larger blocks of text, as Vijanti noted, and you find these clarifications taking place within those that help to tie them together with other large blocks of text.
All right.
God to different writers.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't make a lot of sense. This hodgepodge that'd be quite unique in ancient Middle Eastern literature. We don't see that anywhere else. So the scholarship.
So, importantly, this is true. Should you take a drink for that?
Yeah, sure.
Because this is true. Because it is. And this is one of the things that gets leveled against the documentary hypothesis all the time, is that it is a unique feature of ancient Near Eastern literature, as far as we know. This is yes, something that seems fairly unique to this author or this editor. But what's that?
I have a question. Do cultures sometimes do things in a unique way that other cultures don't do?
Right?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's an objection that I think should be. It carries some weight, but I don't think it's enough weight to overturn the idea, given the weight of all the other evidence. And yeah, it's a good thing to point out. If you want to say that a culture has done something that no other culture around them has done, that requires evidence for you to demonstrate that. I just think that the evidence is pretty well demonstrated at this point. But it is true that is a barrier to overcome.
I will say on that point, though, that this is something, while it's certainly unique to the literature of the period, it's actually something that we see happening later. We don't have the entirety of Tatian's Diatessaron, which is his conflation of the four gospels, right? But this is based, like the pieces of the Diatessaron that we have basically employ a lot of the same principles that we see active in the ways in which the Pentateuch was constructed from varieties of sources.
Attempt to reconcile these somewhat contradictory texts into a coherent narrative.
Yep.
This is one of those things where I kind of want to toss it back in the face of people who are either fundamentalists and literalists self-proclaimed, or the very new atheists r/atheist types.
The ones who just assume Christian exegesis is the best way to do it.
Either you can criticize the Christian Bible for having 4 gospel accounts that don't perfectly match up, or you can criticize the Torah for stitching different narratives together. Pick a struggle.
Yeah. One of those, if one of those is really, really bad, it would seem to mean that the other one is okay. Yeah.
Used to promote this documentary hypothesis, it'd be laughed out of court if it was applied to any other book. And yet,
we don't do history in court. We don't do court.
Also, look, the Pentateuch is a unique collection of works. No one is trying to apply this to other collections of works because they don't seem to meet those same criteria, right? Other works don't seem to be explicable in this way. So no one's out there trying to say well, the Anglo-Saxon chronicles are actually stitched together from 5 different sets of chronicles, even though this is the Anglo-Saxon chronicle that's specifically from this one town. Okay. No one's out there saying oh, hey, I bet, the Platonic dialogues are all stitched together from 18 different authors, because they don't seem to be. They seem to have a consistent style with a consistent author, which is probably Plato.
Oh, bingo.
So this is a constant pet peeve of mine, and it's a little bit tangential, but it drives me absolutely crazy. Where did this idea that lawyers are the arbiters of truth in all aspects, where did this come from? Because you see it, all over the goddamn place.
I don't know.
I think to them, It's because they're authoritarians, and in their mind, if something happens in a court of law, then it's been decreed from on high. Therefore, you can't question it, and it's unimpeachable.
And to be
that's
fair,
my running.
There's a way in which that's how society treats it, right? Like, if someone is currently on trial for a crime, right? You can say they're an alleged person who does thing, right? Like you can say alleged murderer so and so, but then once they're convicted, suddenly you don't have to say alleged anymore because it's been demonstrated, even though we know that just the finding of a court is not on its own proof that the thing that has been declared by the court to have happened did happen. It just has been demonstrated to the sufficiency for that court to declare that that's what happened. And I think that because as a society we tend to treat court results as if they are just the truth, that's why this seems like a good argument, or not argument even, but just
while also holding the fact that court cases and evidentiary, like court cases are overturned, their rulings are overturned all the time. And evidentiary standards, like you have to include the fact that, like, hey, sometimes later forensics determines that a suspect who was guilty at a previous trial is actually not guilty based on the new
check out the Innocence
evidence.
Project.
So,
if you're interested in the U.S. stuff, right?
Real.
There's so many cases that have been overturned by the Innocence Project, or just that they've been noted as having been overturned. Reverse Lamed Ryu for $4.99 says, lawyers are not truth, but lawyers are literally paid 6+ figures to argue, so might know how to argue. I'll give you that. Lawyers tend to be really good at arguing. Roasting a Code of Holiness Keller for $1.99 says, alleged linguist. That's fair. I'm an alleged linguist. That's true.
You are a alleged linguist.
Yeah,
Many of us allege it. Yeah.
Strawberry paraphrased academically vein with yet another 5th super chat. Says, I finally got moved into my new house and now I'm listening to this while building a desk. Thank you all for distracting me from the unfathomable amount of pain in my body. Well, I'm glad to distract from that. That sounds like it sucks. Good luck with the desk. April Van Ryn, who's been a member for 13 months, says, court rulings are always correct, right, OJ? Yeah.
Also, I do want to say, Baba Ali in the chat says, but theology says the Bible's infallible and unchanging. Both stitching and compiling go against those claims. We don't have to pick a lane. Yeah, you do, because theology doesn't say the Bible's infallible. One specific group's theology says the Bible is infallible.
And it's a smaller group than you would think.
Or theology as a general practice. It is one specific group whose theology says
I want to point out that biblical infallibility is actually not a long-standing Christian dogma or anything. For thousands of years, Christians have noticed that there were things that probably couldn't all be true in the Bible, and just been like, yeah, okay. Like that's.
And guess who's late to that game? Christians. Jews have been
the critics want
dealing with this shit for way longer.
Yeah.
We're not rocked by this. Like, get a grip.
I got to say one more thing here. As a biblical scholar, I am becoming very accustomed to, representatives of other disciplines coming in and telling me how to do my job. You hear it from lawyers. Yes. I was in a Clubhouse chat the other day where unfathomably I was being told that a certain cold case detective knows my work better than I do. I'm consistently told by the so-called mixologists or the maximal data people that as a biblical scholar I don't know what I'm doing, from a philosophical perspective or an epistemological perspective. And then the mythicists are telling me that I don't know what I'm doing because I'm not an actual historian. And then the classicists are telling me that I don't know what I'm actually doing because I'm not a classicist. God.
Yeah. People, you need to go get like 4 more degrees and then finally you'll know what you're doing.
Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Really?
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
We have about let's see. We've got
a minute.
I think 2.5 minutes left of this, which is not enough for another week. but we could push through and get through it.
Just play straight through it.
I'm good. Because my late afternoon stream
so
got
the conclusion
canceled.
here is that ultimately the author of Genesis was God working through Moses. This
Command Cyborg for 26 says, but in an honest court of law with a Godzilla, we'll take a drink. I love that Kent Hovind loves that phrase, in an honest court of law, despite the fact that he has never fared well in courts.
Yeah, if it rules in his favor, it's honest.
Obviously, yeah. That's, I mean, to be fair, that does seem to be how a lot of people who are in court seem to act, as if the only way for the court to be honest is if they agree with them. So
does not mean that God used Moses as kind of like a typewriter, rather that God prepared Moses for his task.
Yeah, it is kind of what they're saying, but okay.
From the day he was born, when the time came, Moses had all the necessary data and was, of course, infallibly guided by the Holy Spirit as to what
necessary data. He was raised as an Egyptian in an Egyptian household.
The Egyptians kept really good records from other people from all the way to before the flood. It's just a thing. Don't worry about it.
Maybe his Hebrew mom and sister were slipping him like secret records on the fly.
Well, I mean,
that's it, right?
You know, at least
Yocheved would just go in and be like, "All right, here's your snack, little baby Moshe."
They just loaded
little bassinet.
Vicente, they just loaded that basket up with plate tab.
Full of plate tablets.
They weave the basket out of like scrolls.
he included and what he left out. This is totally consistent with known history.
That's what he was doing for the first 20 years
and
of
the
his
claims
life
and the principles of Scripture found, for example, in 2 Timothy 3:15-17 and 2 Peter 2:1.
This is why the narratives seem like they're different. Because when he was like,
no historical evidence and no spiritual or theological basis whatsoever for this deceptive JEDP.
What is deceptive about it? I hate this imputation of deceit onto this. There's nothing deceptive going on here. The only way for this to be deceptive is if the editor had then put in some bit that was like, and this is what Moses said. Like, or had put in like, by Moses. The actual texts themselves are anonymous. They do not list a particular author.
Egyptian papyrus, like, just in 2 quick sentences, explain to me how it's made.
So basically, you take reeds and you hammer them flat and weave them together like a basket.
Great. Okay, so that's that part. The Egyptian papyrus is made the same way that Moses' basket was made out of, like reeds and strips, right?
There you go.
So my headcanon is that Yocheved gave Moses a basket woven out of like ancient strips that were taken from like the records of Adam and Noah that had been preserved. And she wove the basket and put him in it and was like, all right, man, I'm going to just stick you in the river and preserve all this history with you. And Moses' like task as he grew up was to unweave the basket and reassemble the parchments into the one true narrative of the people and then pass that down.
We're writing a journal article, Vishanti.
Yeah, and when the narratives conflict, it's because this strip and that strip, he just got the order wrong, and that's, that was my bad.
Yeah.
But he preserved them.
Yes.
The documentary hypothesis. Its teaching is completely false. Yeah. It promotes.
Hold on. Sorry, we got to stop for a minute because I wanted to say something that I think is really important. The documentary hypothesis was developed over, centuries, decades, but really sort of kernelized in the 19th century, and very critically, people, these were Christians.
Yep.
Yeah. Good grief.
Yeah, this was not a bunch of godless atheists trying to tear down the Bible.
Well, actually, they weren't true Christians, TM, because if they were true Christians, they would believe in this one specific late evangelical theology that didn't happen until, like, after they were born. And no.
Scholarship, propped up by the theory of evolution, it exists.
What?
What is it? Non sequitur.
I'm taking a drink for that one. Hey, Kip, how often do you have to reference like population genetics when you're doing your work as a Bible scholar? Just curious. Is it none? Because I feel like it's probably none.
It's none. It's really none.
So, like you never have to figure out like the fitness effect of some particular mutation and how that relates to the text of the Bible.
I did not.
How weird.
Solely to undermine the authority of the Word of God.
Exactly. Yeah, if you've ever been taught that, you might want to re-examine it.
Literally by the way, trying to do that.
Nope.
Oh my God.
Nope. They were Christian scholars trying to understand the history of the texts that were in their sacred collection of texts.
This is so dumb.
Like these guys, importantly, like these guys were trying to provide provide a clear explanation for the univocality and the historical veracity of the text.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is how it happened. It just.
So in the 14th century, the scholar, is it Bonfils, was one of the people who were helping to investigate this. In the 15th century, Tostatus, which sounds like tostada, which makes me hungry.
Yeah, I know. Right?
Was a bishop of Avila, and he stated certain passages, notably the account of Moses' death, could not have been written by Moses. So these guys are late to the game. Okay, let's see. There's other people like British philosopher Thomas Hobbes. Then you've got Isaac de la Peyrère, a French Calvinist who explicitly wrote that Moses wasn't the author of the first 5 books of the Bible. In Holland, the philosopher Spinoza published a unified critical analysis
Jewish
demonstrating
converted to Christianity, Benedict Spinoza.
Yep.
Yeah.
He published a thing that was like, oh yeah, this is just not an entire unified narrative. So in France, Richard Simon, if you want to be like clunky about it, a convert from Protestantism who became a Catholic priest, wrote a book that he was trying to critique Spinoza, but he said the core of the Pentateuch was Mosaic, but that there were some additions. So these guys are like completely freaking wrong about everything.
So I want to say...
The earliest source critics were Christian. And they're like...
Al Trucker, who's been a member for 13 months, says, AIG is please read what I said above, which seems to be, I can sense that. So I think that's supposed to be an AIG is a bag of dicks joke, although I don't understand exactly how it works. There might be a missing message somewhere. We'll take a drink for it anyway.
Lisan al Darwin.
Yeah, Savage Creationist Cobra for $2 says, Lisan al Darwin. And Roasting the Code of Holiness Keller for $4.99 says, why is everything really related to the theory of biological evolution? Oh, because they're idiots. It's actually not related.
Yeah.
That's it. It's because they're idiots.
It was the lie. It's the lie in the garden, isn't it?
Dapper, the message Al Trucker wanted you to read is, AIG is a bamboozling, bloviating big bag of bargain basement bones, battalion bog barf, bazaars bloated with brainless brasses booming botfly bombs. Boom.
Botfly. That's the worst part.
I'm just super giggly right now because I'm drinking straight rye.
You didn't put any coffee in there?
No, this is just straight rye.
Some Awe, who's been a member for 5 months, says everyone knows theology didn't evolve until Charles Darwin with an AIG as a bag of dicks emoji and a Godzilla. So we'll take it.
Well done.
Here we go.
Computer testing actually agrees. Genesis had one author. Here's a following quote from Omni Magazine of August 1982.
Heck is Omni Magazine?
Oh, the
Omni Magazine.
Amazing authoritative source, Omni Magazine.
I've never heard of this publication. What is it?
I haven't either.
Oh, okay.
I have.
After feeding the 20,000 Hebrew words of Genesis into a computer at Technion University in Israel, researchers found many sentences that ended in verbs and numerous words of 6 characters or more.
Okay.
Because these idiosyncratic patterns appear again and again, says project director Yehuda Rade, it seems likely that a sole author was responsible.
Wrong.
That sounds more like the characteristics of particular languages, right? A lot of Latin sentences end in a verb because Latin speakers like to put the verbs last. I don't...
Oh my God.
Yeah.
They're exhaustive.
This reminds me... So... Listen, this kind of reminds me. There have been a few of these computer models that have been performed over the last, especially in the 80s, right? When computers were becoming a thing. It brings to mind one computer analysis that was conducted of the Book of Isaiah in an effort to show univocality there and to confront the clear perspective that it was compiled from separate bits. And when you actually look at the model itself, what you discover is that there's an enormous amount of consistency drawn from the reusage of like prepositions. So, words like by and in and with and for. I mean,
yeah, the
try and write without those words.
Articles? Are you serious?
Vishanti, come on, those are prepositions.
Prepositions, sorry. I told you this week that I'm not good at grammar, so.
Oh, I suppose technically, since we're speaking linguistically neutrally, I should say they're adpositions, because in some languages they're postpositions.
Let me correct myself. I'm very good at English grammar. I'm not good at just telling you what the parts of speech are. Like if you tell me to pick out the participle and the gerund, I'm going to be like, oh, just let me write the sentence. So weird.
Also, these guys, they realize that this particular article is over 40 years old by now. And I mean...
And as multiple people have pointed out in chat, Omni's a pop sci-fi mag.
Yeah,
so.
Right.
Computer analysis conducted in Israel suggested an 82% probability that the book had just one author. I'd say 100% because the Bible says that it was Moses.
100%.
Or the Bible tells me so.
Oh my goodness.
Does the Bible say it was Moses? Does it actually?
I mean,
buddy?
The best they could argue for was that New Testament authors referred to the first 5 books as the books of Moses. And that Jesus said, if you didn't listen to Moses, then you won't listen if someone rises from the dead. Which I don't think are particularly compelling arguments that the New Testament is definitively saying who wrote those books, but whatever. Roasting a Code of Holiness color for $9.99 says, this is a test. Al Trucker says, AIG is a bamboo-zizzling, bloviating big bag of bargain basement and battalion bog barf bazaars bloated with brainless brass booming pop-fly bombs boom.
Bombs boom.
It worked.
Wow, it sure did. I shudder. I shudder to think what's going to happen when these guys discover the existence of the Temple Scroll.
Oh, brother.
But there was one thing I wanted to point out there. You don't get to just say that I think it's actually 100% when someone reports that their finding says 84%. You can say you think that the conclusion is 100% true, but you can't say that their finding was 100% because their finding was their finding. You can take issue with their finding.
Data was like...
Yeah, like if you say it was actually 100%, you're just lying about their results. Savage pre-Yiddish Cobra for $2 says, for the Bible, don't tell me shit. I mean, it certainly tells you some stuff.
There's another evidence, that that favors
tell you
another. Oh my God, people! Like, what is
Let me
this?
point that out. Savage Cobra, the Bible does tell you how to take a shit. You're supposed to go outside the camp and bury it in the ground with a trowel.
No,
well, that's when you're on campaign.
Get hiking, Savage Cobra. You better start walking, buddy.
But that's a rule for when you're on campaign. I don't think Savage Cobra is on campaign right now.
Why is it that Christian apologists seem to be the only ones who are insistent that the word evidence is like a singular noun?
Specifically, it's a count noun. And I don't know why, but it's just ubiquitous in Christian apologetics, whether or not it be creationism or anything.
Astonishing.
Look, I'm enough of a descriptivist that I'm just going to say it's just how that particular sociolect works. And it's not wrong, it's just not standard. But it's sort of I think it actually just might be like an in-group marker.
It's ubiquitous,
too,
right? Like it's all these guys.
That's because it's a sociolect. Sociolects, like other forms of language, have consistent rules. One of the rules of the sociolect used by Christian apologists is that the word evidence is a count noun.
Yeah.
That's just
which is interesting because they were just talking about, like, in the chat, they were talking about how Elohim is technically plural, but it's used for a singular entity.
Yeah.
So
it's morphologically plural, but it's grammatically often singular in the sense that you use singular forms of verbs when it's the subject of the verb.
One of the difficult elements of doing this kind of work is that, so by the time most of the texts were codified and written down, the word Elohim was used almost exclusively to refer to a single deity, right? Mm-hmm. But we do still, it's a plural word, yes, but and you do still see very occasional usages that retain the plural aspect of it. They're just difficult to isolate, and they again never translate well into English.
Almost like translation is a whole big nuanced thing, and it's impossible to always translate every single nuance in an original language into a target language.
That we can trust the Bible as the Word of God. Yeah. That Genesis is not some polemic produced by a committee.
I don't think anyone's saying
what it is. It is a polemic.
It is a polemic.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
It's like nakedly obvious that it's a polemic.
Psychic damage wherever he is right now. Like, telling
even
this isn't a polemic when the flood narrative is literally a polemic against like the Enuma Elish.
What are you
from a fundamentalist perspective? Isn't it?
Sends a blank membership check. So thank you very much.
But even from a fundamentalist perspective, isn't this polemic literature?
Yeah, it's like you would think
yes.
So. Like the thing is, it doesn't have to be false in order to be a polemic. I think that's the thing that they're trying to think, right? And look, I'm not saying that I think obviously you guys know that I don't think that the story of the flood is literally true. But you can hold in your brain at the same time, without contradiction, the idea that this is an accurate account and the idea that it was specifically written down in order to help counter a common narrative from a wider, more dominant culture that you're currently subjected to. Like, I don't see why that's a problem.
You could just say our version's the right one.
Yeah.
Right. But the crazy thing is that these, and this makes me sad, like this makes me honestly sad, is when you understand the ways in which the polemics function within these individual blocks of text, it helps so much to see like the meaning and the significance of these types of literature. One of the things that my good friend Dr. Josh, I have started to really key in on when we talk about, in particular, like the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis, specifically, is the ways in which these specific texts functioned as a sort of anti-urban polemic, right?
By the way,
get out of the cities.
That right there,
get back to the land.
Something. So real quick, Flip23 for $2 says, data from Star Trek shaking hands with Elohim having plural names. True. Data from Star Trek, that the word data is plural. Pimplepunk, half dog, half canine, echoing what someone else had already said also, who's been a member for 10 months and is at the tetrapod level, says, what's a polemic anyway? So, a polemic is basically something that you write in order to counter someone else's narrative about some topic, right? So someone says, oh, the gods flooded the earth because humans were too noisy, and then one of the gods surreptitiously warned this one guy to get his family together and his animals together and put them on a boat. And then you come and you say, okay, yeah, of course there was a flood. Everyone knows there was a giant flood. There's no question about that. But these guys
got the reason wrong.
These guys got the whole detail of the story wrong, right? It was a different guy in a different boat. The boat wasn't shaped like a box. It was oblong, obviously. There was a better reason than just humans are noisy. Obviously. The humans were actually just horrible, evil people who were evil continuously, which, remember, if you take that literally, means that you had to have, like, evil color choices for your curtains, whatever that means.
Evil grinding of grain.
Yeah. Evil nursing of babies. All evil. So, yeah, that's more or less what a polemic is, or a polemic. I hear it both ways. I don't really care.
That definitely wasn't hyperbole.
Well, that's the thing is, I actually do think it's just hyperbole, and I don't think it's a problem to say it. But the reason I pointed out is because I'm frequently countering literalists. And it's like, oh yeah, you think this is literal? You think they were literally continuously evil? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. Let me go to sleep, but evilly.
Yeah, I'm going to take an evil nap.
For more information, be sure to check out the articles in this video's description below here.
All right, so I guess that's just the end commercial
amazing.
Yeah, that's it.
All right,
yay, we did it.
It just baffles my mind that their best argument for this is just, one, the New Testament makes somewhat vague references about the Torah and Moses in connection with it. Like, okay, yeah, that's true, I guess. But it's, bit of circular argument. And then the other one is, if we misunderstand the evidentiary basis for the documentary hypothesis, then it seems implausible. Which, yeah, I guess that's not exactly a super compelling argument, though, is it? So yeah, this was.
Man.
It's good to know that CMI is as good at biblical scholarship as they are at everything else, which is to say, profoundly bad. Rosa McCullough, or should we say they are deeply personally bad at this? See, Rosa Code of Holiness Color for $4.99 says evil color choices began with when the blue-green distinction was made. Yes, yeah. Once we started having separate words for blue and green, it was all over. That's when sin really entered into the world. All right, so everybody, we went a little bit long on this one, but that's okay because I was thinking maybe we'd squeeze a third one out of this, but then there just wasn't enough time. So let's take a look at I'm going to take a look at what's coming up on my channel. Kip, do you have anything you want to announce? What's coming up? With you?
I was supposed to be sitting down with potential theist in 40 minutes to discuss a really, really bad video by the godless engineer about how there's no evidence for the crucifixion of Jesus. Sadly,
one of the few historical events around Jesus for which there is evidence.
Yeah, but sadly, potential theist has a toothache.
Oh, that's
so.
Those are rough.
So that's been indefinitely postponed. I'm sure I'm sure we'll get it back on the schedule here relatively soon. I don't have anything imminent coming up, I don't think, but I have a couple things in the hopper. I'll just make the announcement now because I'm pretty excited about this. Some people might have noticed that my good friend Dr. Joshua Bowen, aka the slavery guy, and I did a very long and tedious response video stream to a popular video that was made by one Dr. Gavin Ortland about biblical slavery. So, and Gavin Ortland has actually delivered a response to us in the meantime. But I'm happy to report that we have been in touch with Gavin, and we're getting together to do a live discussion about biblical slavery. Dr. Josh will be there. I will be there. Gavin will be there. And he will be joined by Catholic Christian apologist Trent Horn. So the four of us are hanging out. Okay. And we're talking about biblical slavery live.
Nice.
And that's going to happen sometime near the end of May. So it'll be a few weeks yet, but I am super excited. Do you have a moderator for that?
Because, I don't know what happens if y'all just start talking over each other.
No, we do. And all of us are except for me. But I mean, the other three guys are super polite and.
Yeah, I was going to say Josh doesn't interrupt people. That's a good point.
No. But quick,
so Renee, who's been a member for 5 months and at the annual level, says, "Hey, I managed to see the entire stream before D&D today."
Nice.
Very cool.
Very good.
So, is there anything else that you got coming up?
I don't think so. That's probably it. We'll be reading Hebrew again. Josh and I will be reading Hebrew again on Thursday, continuing in Jeremiah chapter 1. As sure as that's an almond branch, and if you want to know what that means, then you need to join our Hebrew stream.
I wasn't volunteering to be the moderator. I was just asking because I get very concerned when people are like, "Oh, we're going to have a discussion," and there's not a moderator because then it just goes off the rails and no one is there to bring it back.
One of these days, Vishanti, you're going to be free when I ask you to moderate something.
Hey, I already blocked off the day in May, so
speaking of
the second day in May, I've already blocked it off.
Do you have anything coming up?
Actually, no. The only thing I was thinking about doing is creating a short, but I'll just do it here. Hey, Sal, until you watch Dapper's video on John Sanford, I'm not giving you the time of day. You bigot.
Fair enough.
That was pretty short.
Yeah.
You didn't even have to make a short.
You could probably clip this and turn it into a short real easily.
I could. I feel like it.
What's coming up this week? I'm not today. So on Tuesday, we're going to be having Jackson with Jackson. That's already scheduled. Then on Thursday, the third bit of the Incarnate God of the Gap series about Jennifer Hall Rivera is coming out. That one is How Do Fossils Work? So Jennifer Hall Rivera is going to show that she just has no idea how fossils work. Which, to be fair, normally wouldn't be a problem, unless you're trying to convince people that fossils don't work the way we know them to, and you don't know anything about them in the first place. So there's that. Then on Saturday, I'm not sure what we're doing. I will have to find something new to talk about because we have finished this up. Because we get to the bit where they're just like, oh, hey, go to our website, which no. I mean, I guess you guys can if you want to. If you want to go to creation.com or whatever, feel free. But yeah, that's what's coming up for the next week here on this channel. If you are interested, over on the Discord for supporters, we are going to watch a little bit of Power Rangers Dino Thunder. And yeah, so with that, I will leave all of you guys. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Stay safe out there, and I hope to see all of you on Tuesday. Hey, Yoko Weasel, Whispers, Denny5252, Elleron Teller, Horseflesh, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostick Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babby, Monkey They Them, Sphincter of Doom, Vollus, John Ackerman, Ita V, and Strawberry Vein. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.